My goal for today's video is to cover some of the portal modifiers that are really worth running, especially when you're grinding for power levels. Some of these you've definitely overlooked, and if you understand how they work, it could actually make your runs much faster. Especially for some of the modifiers that you might not have actually thought to try before now, because you either didn't know what they do, or maybe you've used them before Edge of Fate and hated them. I'm looking at you, Oscillation. But some of these modifiers have actually been reworked and can be really beneficial to you if you know how to take advantage of them. And one of those modifiers lets you keep a 400% damage boost for your heavy weapons up almost the entire run. So stick around if you want to know about that, along with all of the other modifiers that I think are really good, or use the timestamps in the description to move to whatever you feel you want to watch. If you do find this video helpful, please leave a like to let me know, as it helps grow the channel, and it helps spread the info too. If you think there's a modifier that I've overlooked, drop it in the comments so that I can learn from you as well as everybody else, because I'm sure I've missed something since I'm only human. Now, just before I get into it, if you find yourself enjoying my other content as well, please consider subscribing too. Thanks. Now, in the next update, because challenge modifiers will no longer increase the power delta of your activity, it will actually be fixed and dependent on the difficulty of the activity that you pick on launch. It will likely be better for the speed of your grind if you can find challenge modifiers that don't impact you at all, or even better, benefit you. Then you won't need to run player stakes like extinction or locked loadouts if you don't like them. I'll jump straight into some of the challenge modifiers that are essentially free, starting with anti-surges. These are really simple modifiers. They reduce the player's damage of a specific element. If you and your team don't plan on using these elements, then these are just free score multipliers that will have no negative impact on you at all, don't change how the gameplay feels, and freely increase your score multiplier. I tested it just to make sure, and it is 25% decrease in damage for that specific element. Just like anti-surges, the hunger modifiers target a specific element, but unlike the anti-surges, they can give you substantial benefits if you build into them. Dealing damage of the specific type will build a meter. Filling that meter gives you increased ability regeneration across the board, and the subclass doesn't have to match the hunger. This means, for example, you could run a strand subclass with solar hunger, and so long as you have a solar weapon to fill the hunger meter, you will eventually gain improved ability regen. Of course, with this being a challenge modifier, the downside to running these is that if you don't build into the hunger by default, then your ability regen at base will be much worse. However, as of right now, the modifier doesn't actually seem to be making your base regen worse. But if you do build into it, it opens the door for some insane ability spam builds, and it honestly doesn't require that much damage to trigger the effect of the modifier in the first place, so the uptime is almost constant. I honestly think this will be the way forward for build videos. On top of creating a build that is good, build videos will probably feature specific modifiers to pair with it. At least that's what I'm planning to do moving forward. Bringing it back to the hunger modifiers, there is also a chance that there is the option to pick multiple hunger modifiers. As you can see, I had the choice between Arc and Solar, and they interact a little bit weirdly with each other. The ability regen doesn't seem to stack with each other, it just gives you the ability to build two separate hunger meters with two different elements. Although each element has its own progress bar, so you can't deal 50% solar and 50% arc and expect to get the benefits, you will still need to deal a certain amount of damage with a single element before you can get additional ability regen. Moving on, Oscillation is, in my opinion, the best modifier for general content at the moment, and I'm surprised I haven't seen anyone talk about it yet. And there's also a sneaky little bug with it at the moment. It's been reworked quite a bit with the release of Edge of Fate, no longer pairing certain weapons from the artifact to function. Instead, it pairs the kinetic slot and the heavy weapon slot together to buff energy weapons, and energy weapons will then buff heavy and kinetic slot weapons. The weapon damage buff at 3 stacks of Oscillation is a 400% increase in damage, and if you have a hard-hitting heavy weapon like Acreus or Parasite or Heliatus, This can be really effective since their damage is packed into a single payload. However, the downside is you need to constantly swap your weapons to keep the damage bonus going instead of being stuck with stacks of weapon decay. Now for the sneaky bug, what I noticed while I did multiple runs with this challenge modifier active is that micro missile weapons and all the damage from them do not increase or decrease your weapon damage boost. So rocket sidearms, rocket pulses, micro missile frame grenade launchers, and even the wolf packs from G-Horn don't count as weapon damage for this modifier. I don't know why, it's just a thing. Their damage also doesn't change based on the number of stacks that you have, so it's a win-lose situation. The best part of this modifier comes when you build into the bug. If you have a build that lets you basically have infinite ammo for a rocket-assisted weapon, then you can run this challenge modifier and it will feel like you're running some anti-surges, as it won't affect your damage. To paint a better example, if you only use a rocket-assisted weapon for all of your damage, for example Mint, then the buff will not change and you can keep a 3x stack of weapon damage boost active on your heavy weapon the entire time, allowing us to keep the 400% damage bonus loaded all the time. So we can nuke champions and bosses whenever we need to while getting a score multiplier absolutely free. And this is why Oscillation is my current favorite challenge modifier. But that's enough glazing Oscillation. Next up is Volatile Shields. You've probably already seen this if you've done a few seasonal conquests. Outside of those, most people probably ignore this modifier. However, this modifier can be useful, especially while doing content solo. Even though the modifier says a teammate needs to defuse you, if you receive healing from any source, it can remove the bomb effect, allowing you to use this modifier while solo. Since you have additional resistance while you're in this low health phase, healing builds can actually be used to get you out of dangerous situations and behind cover while you heal. This is healing from any source, including healing turrets, cure from weapons, armor, and orbs. Abilities like Banner of War or Restoration also work. And a side note is that you can save your teammate by using healing abilities on them. Just know that if you don't heal out of the red zone, you are basically just delaying the inevitable. Another really useful but also very fun modifier is Ashes to Ashes. It's another one of the challenge modifiers that can increase the potency of your loadout if you build into it. The modifier says that solar weapons scorch enemies, but now enemies can scorch the player. However, when testing, I found that only the first instance of solar damage applies Scorch to non-scorched enemies, so you can't cause an ignition with just any random solar weapon. In order to take full advantage of this modifier, you need to have an additional way to increase the Scorch on enemies. The two best ways that came to mind are Burning Ambition on a ton of solar weapons from this season, and Helion, since they both ramp up the Scorch stacks at a pretty good rate on an enemy once they're scorched. This modifier will not be for everyone, and honestly, it's a modifier that you should use if you can build into it. And that is the general principle for picking modifiers, I feel. Pick a modifier that you can build into to make your Guardian more powerful. And I'm going to use that to segue into explaining Boon and event modifiers. The Boon modifiers are extremely important when grinding powerful gear. I always tried to avoid them at first because they reduced my score, but honestly, that was a mistake. They may reduce your score, but depending on the modifiers that you pick, the speed you can farm activities can substantially improve, even if you have to increase the power delta to compensate. See, most of the boons that you can pick will actually reduce your score by half a challenge modifier, meaning you will want to pick boons that can really speed up your runs and compensate with basically a single challenge modifier. And you'll probably be picking a challenge modifier that doesn't affect you like an anti-surge. Full Throttle is probably one of the best modifiers available. Every enemy you kill adds 1 stack to your counter, and the enemy type and the ammo used don't matter. Every enemy is worth 1 stack, and each kill adds a 1% damage increase that stacks with every other damage increase in the game, capping out at 100%. So up to double your damage across the board for just playing the game. It doesn't go away on fast travels or zone changes, so it's useful in reclaim. It doesn't go away when you die, so it's fine for hard content, especially hard content. And it increases all damage, so ability builds also benefit. By running just this modifier, your entire farming run could go much faster. Another one of the Boon modifiers that I think is really strong is Fury. If you remember the Solstice event, there was an event-specific version of Fury called Fired Up, essentially allowing you to have infinite heavy if you played a certain way. Fury is very similar, if not identical, to that modifier. Defeating combatants builds Fury. At full Fury, gain heavy ammo, ability regen, and weapon buffs. And while testing this modifier, it does almost exactly what it says. It gives you full heavy ammo regardless of the weapon type that you're using, your ability regen rate is increased, and the weapon buff that it mentions adds an explosive payload to your weapon that deals a flat amount of damage regardless of the weapon type. To build Fury, you need kills, and the type of enemy you kill doesn't really seem to matter. Red bars or yellow bars, they contribute about the same amount of Fury progress per kill. The Fury ability regen does seem to stack with the ability regen from a Hunger Challenge modifier, so if you build into these, you can make your ability builds even stronger. There are a few other boons that are a flat increase to your damage, and running any combination of these will make your runs faster. Any weapon surge is a 25% increase in damage for that specific element. Air superiority is a 30% increase in damage when airborne, while Shot Caller and Slayer are a 20% increase in damage. Although Slayer will only increase the damage of the player with the most kills, so it's good for solos, not so much for team-based. And lastly, heavyweight is a 100% increase for heavy weapons only. Now at the time of posting this video, player stakes are almost always the best modifiers to add while grinding power levels, since they only increase the reward multiplier without affecting the power delta. The activity won't get more difficult from the enemies hitting harder, but it will become more challenging, like playing with one hand behind your back. The best player stakes to run include Pressure Cooker, Touche, and Extinction. This is because they add a ton of score multiplier, but they're also not likely to affect how you actually play the game. Pressure Cooker is the best example of this. It provides a massive boost to your score multiplier for completing the activity within a set time frame, as most players will be completing activities within the game during this specific time frame. Bungie has tweaked most activities so that the time threshold is fair and doable, but I know they have made a couple of mistakes, like Presage being almost unbeatable on release and required a fix for this. But Presage aside, Pressure Cooker is a really good modifier to run. Extinction is also a really good modifier that players might not be running. This is because it's not enabled by default, you have to actively set this, and it is only available in ultimate difficulty. This modifier provides one of the largest score multipliers available, but for most activities, you have one life. It's definitely one of the riskier modifiers, however in some fireteam activities like Reclaim, the game will revive down teammates, allowing you to have multiple revives, even though the modifier explicitly states no revives available. The modifier doesn't change your gameplay outside of requiring you to do it flawlessly. No starting ammo is one of the modifiers I sometimes run and sometimes don't run, but it's dependent on what activity I'm running. If you've been avoiding this modifier completely because you prefer to load in with special ammo, I suggest evaluating it on an activity by activity basis, mainly due to the fact that some Pinnacle ops give you a rally banner very early in the activity, so running this modifier does basically nothing. Alternatively, if you build into the weapon stat, then you can just as easily generate the special and heavy ammo that you need to get your build going. And that wraps up all the modifiers I felt needed a spotlight. As I said, some of the modifiers you will need to build into, but if you do, you can get some decent benefits out of it. If you think there are other modifiers I should have mentioned, let me know in the comments so that both me and the rest of the community can learn from you. Anyway, that's all from me. Have a great rest of your day.